I never thought I'd be the kind of person who falls in love with their roommate. That sounds like something from a movie, right? But here I am, sitting on my bed at 2 in the morning, trying to make sense of what Dylan just told me 30 minutes ago. My heart is still racing, my hands are still shaking, and I can hear him moving around in his room right next door, probably unable to sleep just like me. Let me back up. I should probably start from the beginning, because this whole thing has been building for months, and I was too scared or too stupid to see it for what it was. Dylan and I met through a roommate finder app back in August. I had just moved to the city for a new job, and he was starting his last year of grad school. We were both looking for someone chill, someone who wouldn't make living together weird. The first time we met in person was the day we both moved into this apartment. He showed up wearing this faded college sweatshirt and jeans with paint stains on them, carrying boxes that were clearly too heavy but refusing to make 2 trips. I remember thinking he had a nice smile. That was it. Just a nice smile. Nothing that made me think my entire life was about to change. Those first few weeks were easy. We figured out a cleaning schedule, learned each other's routines, discovered we both liked cooking but hated doing dishes. Dylan would make these elaborate meals on Sunday nights, and I'd handle cleanup. He'd quiz himself out loud for exams while pacing the living room, and I'd work on my laptop at the kitchen table, half listening to him ramble about architectural theory or whatever he was studying. It was comfortable, normal. The kind of roommate situation everyone hopes for but rarely gets. I'd dated guys before. I've been out since college, so it's not like I was confused about my sexuality or anything. But I also wasn't looking for anything serious. The last relationship I'd been in ended badly, and I was honestly just focused on my career and getting settled in a new city. Romance wasn't even on my radar. Then October happened. Dylan had this massive project due, something that would determine whether he got into some prestigious fellowship program. He was stressed beyond belief, barely sleeping, living on coffee and stress. I'd come home from work and find him surrounded by blueprints and models, looking like he hadn't moved in hours. One night, I found him asleep at the dining table, his head on his arms, pencil still in his hand. And I just stood there for a minute, looking at him. Really looking at him, the way his hair fell across his forehead, the tension in his shoulders even in sleep. And I felt this overwhelming urge to take care of him, not in a roommate way, in a way that scared me. I made him dinner that night. Nothing fancy, just pasta and the sauce his mom had sent him that he kept saying he was saving for a special occasion. When he woke up and saw what I'd done, he got this look on his face. Surprised. Touched. Something else I couldn't name. We ate together in the living room, sitting on the floor because his stuff had taken over all the normal eating surfaces, and he told me about his project, about his fears that he wasn't good enough, about how much this fellowship meant to him. I listened, I asked questions, and when he got quiet and stared down at his plate, I told him he was the most dedicated person I'd ever met, and that anyone who couldn't see his talent was an idiot. He looked at me then, really looked at me and said thank you in this soft voice that did something to my chest. Made it feel tight and warm at the same time. Then he smiled. That same smile from move-in day, except now it felt different. Or maybe I was different. I don't know. But something shifted that night. After that, I started noticing things. The way Dylan would touch my shoulder when he passed behind me in the kitchen. How he'd text me random things during the day, funny observations or photos of dogs he saw on campus. The way he'd always wait to watch our favorite show until we could watch it together, even if his schedule meant staying up late. Little things. Things that good friends do. Except they didn't feel like just friend things anymore. Not to me. I tried to ignore it. I'd lie in bed at night and tell myself I was being ridiculous. Dylan was straight as far as I knew. He'd mentioned a girlfriend once, someone from undergrad who he'd dated for a while. He'd never given any indication that he was interested in guys, and even if he was, he'd never given any indication he was interested in me. We were roommates, friends. That was it. I needed to get over whatever this was before I made things weird and ruined a good living situation. But then there was the night in November when we ended up at this party together. One of his grad school friends was having people over, and Dylan asked if I wanted to come along. I almost said no. I'd been trying to create a little distance, spending more time in my room, making excuses to be out of the apartment. But he looked so hopeful when he asked, and I couldn't disappoint him. So I went. The party was fine. Lots of people I didn't know. Music too loud for actual conversation, the usual. But Dylan stayed by my side the whole night. He'd introduce me to people, his hand on my lower back as he guided me through the crowd. He'd lean in close to talk to me over the music, his breath warm against my ear. At one point, some guy started hitting on him, really obviously, and Dylan just gave him a polite smile and said he was there with someone, gesturing to me. The guy looked between us, shrugged, and walked away. And I just stood there, trying to process what had happened, trying to figure out if Dylan had meant it the way it sounded, if he'd just claimed me as his date in front of a stranger. On the walk home, Dylan was quiet. We were both a little drunk, not a lot, just enough to feel loose and warm despite the cold air. Our hands kept brushing as we walked, and finally he just grabbed mine and held it, linked our fingers together like it was the most natural thing in the world. I couldn't breathe. I literally forgot how to breathe for a second. But I held on, and we walked the rest of the way home like that, hand in hand, not saying a word. At our building, he let go to get his keys out, and the moment broke. We went inside, said goodnight, went to our separate rooms. I sat on my bed and stared at my hand, the one he'd held, and tried to figure out what the hell was happening. But I was too scared to ask, too scared to ruin whatever this was by putting words to it. December was torture. Finals for Dylan. Year-end crunch time for me at work. We were both stressed and busy, but we kept finding these moments. He'd bring me coffee in the morning, made exactly how I liked it. I'd leave sticky notes on his door before I left for work, little encouragements for his exams. We'd collapse on the couch together at the end of long days, and he'd end up with his head on my shoulder, or I'd end up with my feet in his lap. Casual touches that didn't feel casual at all. At least not to me. His family invited him home for Christmas, and he asked if I had plans. I told him I was going to visit my parents. He looked almost disappointed. The night before we both left, we exchanged gifts. I got him a nice set of drafting pencils he'd been wanting. He got me a first edition of my favorite book, something he must have spent hours tracking down. The inscription inside said, "To my favorite roommate and the best friend I could ask for. Thanks for making this year unforgettable." I read it about 50 times, trying to decode every word, looking for hidden meaning that might not be there. We texted while we were both gone for the holidays, every day, multiple times a day. Stupid stuff mostly. Photos of our family's terrible holiday sweaters. Complaints about relatives asking invasive questions, but also late-night conversations that felt deeper. He told me about feeling pressure from his parents to have his life figured out. I told him about feeling disconnected from my hometown now that I'd moved away. We were both awake until 3 in the morning on Christmas night, just texting back and forth. And at one point he wrote, "I miss you." And I stared at those 3 words for 10 minutes before writing back, "I miss you too." When we both got back to the apartment after New Year's, something was different. There was this tension in the air, this awareness. We'd hug hello and hold on just a bit too long. We'd be sitting on opposite ends of the couch and somehow end up pressed against each other. He'd look at me sometimes with this expression I couldn't read, and I'd catch myself staring at his mouth when he talked. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was projecting my own feelings onto innocent situations. I mean, straight guys can be physically affectionate with their friends, right? That's a thing. Just because every touch felt electric to me didn't mean it meant anything to him. I was probably just a pathetic gay guy falling for his unavailable straight roommate. It's such a cliché I was embarrassed to even think about it. Then came last week. Dylan had gotten into the fellowship program. He'd found out that morning and came home so excited he literally picked me up and spun me around in our tiny kitchen. We went out to celebrate, just the two of us, to this nice restaurant we'd been talking about trying. It felt like a date. Everything about it felt like a date. The way he'd made a reservation, the way he insisted on paying, the way we talked and laughed, and the conversation flowed so easily it was like we were the only two people in the world. Walking home, he grabbed my hand again, and this time neither of us let go until we were inside our apartment. We stood in the living room, and the air felt thick with something unspoken. Dylan was looking at me with that expression again, the one I could never quite read. Then he said he wanted to talk to me about something. My heart dropped. This was it. He was going to tell me he'd noticed me being weird. He was going to ask me to move out. He'd figured out that I had feelings for him, and he was going to let me down easy. But that's not what happened. Instead, Dylan started talking, and his words came out rushed and nervous. He said he needed to tell me something, and he'd been trying to find the right time, but there wasn't going to be a right time, so he was just going to say it. He said that living with me had been the best part of his year, that I'd become his best friend, that he looked forward to coming home every day because I was there. And then he paused, and I could see him gathering courage, and he said that somewhere along the way, his feelings had changed, that he couldn't stop thinking about me, that he'd never felt this way about a friend before. I just stood there. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My brain was trying to process what he was saying, but it felt surreal. Dylan kept talking, filling the silence. He said he knew this was probably weird, that he understood if I didn't feel the same way, that he'd never really been attracted to guys before, but there was something about me that just made sense to him. That he was scared and confused, but also more certain about this than he'd been about anything in a long time. And then he stopped talking and looked at me, waiting for me to say something. Anything. But I was frozen. All those months of telling myself it was one-sided, of convincing myself I was imagining things, and here he was, telling me he felt the same way. I didn't know how to respond. What if I said the wrong thing? What if this was some kind of misunderstanding? Dylan's face started to fall. He took a step back. He said he was sorry, that he shouldn't have said anything, that he hoped we could just forget about it and go back to being normal roommates. And that's when I finally found my voice. I said no. Just no. He looked confused, and I realized how that sounded. So I clarified. No, we couldn't go back to being normal roommates, because I didn't want to be normal roommates, because I'd been falling for him for months and trying to hide it, because every casual touch had been torture, and every smile had made my heart race, and I'd convinced myself I was alone in feeling this way. The look on his face when I said that. Relief and joy and disbelief all at once. He laughed, this breathless kind of laugh, and said he couldn't believe we'd both been hiding the same thing, that he'd been so scared I didn't feel the same way, that he'd almost talked himself out of saying anything a dozen times. We were both just standing there, grinning at each other like idiots. And then Dylan closed the distance between us. He reached up and touched my face, his hand gentle against my cheek, and asked if he could kiss me. I barely got the word yes out before his lips were on mine, and it was like everything clicked into place. Like this was what all those months of tension had been building toward. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, both of us learning this new language. But then it deepened, and his hands were in my hair, and I was pulling him closer, and nothing had ever felt so right. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. Dylan rested his forehead against mine and said this was crazy. I agreed. He said he didn't know what he was doing. I said I didn't either. He said he wanted to figure it out with me, and I said yes. Yes to all of it. We talked for hours that night about what this meant, about how to navigate this new dimension of our relationship, about his concerns that he'd never been with a guy before and might not be good at this. I told him we'd figure it out together, that there was no timeline, no pressure, that I just wanted to be with him and see where this went. He kissed me again, slower this time, and said he'd never been more sure about wanting something even though he was terrified. That was 4 days ago, 4 days of existing in this new reality where Dylan is my boyfriend, where I can reach for his hand without second-guessing, where we kiss goodbye in the morning before work, where we fall asleep on the couch together watching TV and it's not ambiguous anymore. It's intentional. It's real. We haven't told anyone yet. Dylan wants to take some time to process this shift in his own understanding of himself. I get that. Coming out is personal and there's no rush. For now, it's just us, in our apartment, learning how to be together in this new way. And honestly, I love having this secret, this private world where we're figuring out what we are to each other. Last night we were making dinner together, and Dylan was chopping vegetables while I worked on the sauce. He kept stealing glances at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Finally, I asked him what he was thinking about. He put down the knife, wiped his hands on a towel, and came over to where I was standing. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, rested his chin on my shoulder, and said he was thinking about how lucky he was. That he'd answered a roommate and expecting to find someone to split rent with, and instead, he'd found me. Found this. I turned in his arms and kissed him, and the sauce definitely burned a little because we got distracted, but neither of us cared. We ordered pizza instead and ate it, sitting on the kitchen floor, backs against the cabinets, his hand in mine. And it was perfect, completely ordinary and absolutely perfect. I know we're still in the early stages. I know there will be challenges ahead. Dylan is still figuring out his identity, and that's a journey I want to support him through however he needs. We'll have to decide when and how to tell people. We'll have to navigate what happens if one of us wants to move or take a job somewhere else. We'll have to figure out all the normal relationship stuff on top of the fact that we live together and can't really have space if we need it. But right now, at 2 a.m, listening to him move around in his room, knowing that he's probably thinking about me the same way I'm thinking about him, I'm not worried about any of that. I'm just grateful. Grateful that I took a chance on a stranger from a roommate app. Grateful that he took a chance on being honest about his feelings. Grateful for every small moment that led us here. My phone buzzes. A text from Dylan. "Are you still awake?" I smile and type back that I am. Another buzz. "Can I come in?" I tell him yes, and seconds later, my door opens. He's standing there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, hair messy, looking vulnerable and beautiful. He asks if he can sleep in here tonight, says his bed feels too far away, says he just wants to be close to me. I pull back the covers in invitation, and he climbs in next to me. We arrange ourselves, his head on my chest, my arm around him, legs tangled together. He lets out this content sigh and says this is better. I kiss the top of his head and agree. This is so much better. Better than I ever imagined it could be. He tilts his face up to look at me, and even in the dark, I can see the warmth in his eyes. He tells me he's never felt this way about anyone, not just a friend. Anyone. That what he feels for me is bigger and deeper than anything he's experienced before. That it scares him how much he cares already. But it's a good kind of scared. The kind that means something real is happening. I tell him I know exactly what he means. That I feel the same way. That this thing between us snuck up on me and now I can't imagine my life without him in it. Not just as a roommate. Not just as a friend, as the person who knows me better than almost anyone, as the person I want to come home to every day, as the person whose happiness matters as much as my own. We lie there in the dark, talking in whispers, even though there's no one to overhear us. making plans for tomorrow, for next week, for the summer. Nothing concrete, just dreams and possibilities. Maybe we'll take a trip together. Maybe we'll tell our friends soon. Maybe we'll figure out what this looks like long term, or maybe we'll just take it one day at a time and see where it leads. Eventually, our words trail off, and his breathing evens out. He's fallen asleep in my arms, trusting and peaceful. I stay awake a little longer, just holding him, marveling at how much can change in a few short months. How the person sleeping next to me was a stranger in August, and now he's everything. I think about that first day we met, carrying boxes into this apartment, 2 people who needed a place to live. How we became friends. How friendship became something more. How all those moments I thought I was hiding my feelings, he was feeling the same things. How we almost missed this because we were both too scared to speak up. But we didn't miss it. We're here now, together, and whatever comes next, we'll face it as a team, as partners, as 2 people who found something unexpected and chose to be brave enough to see where it could go. Dylan shifts in his sleep, mumbles something I don't quite catch, and holds me tighter. I close my eyes and let myself drift off, knowing that when we wake up tomorrow, he'll still be here. That this isn't a dream or wishful thinking. It's real. We're real, and that's worth everything.